Hello, everyone. Welcome to Jamaica 411. Thank you for joining me today, keeping me company as usual. Yes, Joni, I remember. My name is Michelle Stern, and I'm your host. Let me say a special shout out to my subscribers. Welcome back. Always lovely to have you. And I would like to thank you for your continued support. You are my tower of strength. I also want you to know that I do enjoy reading your comments, so please keep the comments going. If you're here with me for the first time, welcome. I hope that after watching this video, you would have found the truth you came seeking. If you have not yet subscribed, please go ahead and do so because, as you know what old time people say, encouragement sweetens labor. Not true? I would also like to ask you all for a big favor. Please go ahead, give the video a thumbs up from now on. Give the video a thumbs up. Yes, please do. And of course, share. And for your kindness, I thank you all in advance. Well, now that you're back with me, let's get down to business. So, what is the business of today? We're on to Damion Crawford and his presentation in the Senate last Friday, which was March 28, 2025. He made a contribution in response to the budget that was presented by the government in the budget debate. And that budget is for fiscal year 2025-2026. So it came to the Senate for it to be passed. And Damian was making his contribution as to his views on the budget and the presentation of both the finance minister and the prime minister. I'm going to let you hear how we started his contribution, and then I will come in at a critical juncture to put forward a view or two of my own. So we're going to listen to hear what Damian had to say. Damian, of course, being the opposition spokesman on education, and he sits in the Senate. So let's now listen to what Damian had to say.
And also from our university, the Karimak students that are present. I'm happy because the class is about to begin. Mr. President, I title this conversation Truth and Democracy. Because, Mr. President, the government's debate has been shrouded in lies and fake news. What I'd like for the takeaway today, the takeaway project, I hope my teacher will oblige, is that after this presentation, when they go back to school next week, they should write an essay on the types of lies that were stated in the presentations. There are indeed different types of lies. There's a stretch of the truth to make something sound bigger or better. That is called an exaggeration. There's omission, leaving out information, important information, so as to mislead. There's also refusing to admit the truth, even when confronted with evidence. That's called denial. There's fabrication, making up completely false information. Misleading statements, which are statements with the intent to deceive. Blame shifting, lying to avoid responsibility by blaming others. And gaslighting, manipulating someone to doubt their memory or perception. I hope that as of Monday, you can use any of these analyses to tell what types of lies are being told to you or have been told in this entire budgetary process.
And no acts if we no intend to do exactly that, Master Damian. Yes, we thank you for this definition. And I would like to add, if I may be so bold, to your 7 definitions of a lie or the various parts of lies. I would like to add The eighth lie. And what is that eighth lie, Damian? To claim credit for someone else's work to make oneself look better or for any other reason. The eighth lie. To claim credit of someone else's works to make oneself look good or for any other reason. Of course, the intent is to deceive. So I'd like to add that eighth lie. So, Mas Damian, from now on, we will be keeping this blueprint of yours. Whatever statement is made in the parliament, on political platforms by our leaders, we should analyze them with respect to whether they are speaking lies, and we are using your blueprint. Whether or not what they are saying is a stretch of the truth, an omission, leaving out important information, whether they are refusing to admit the truth, like those risers are, whether they are fabricating, making up completely false information, they are putting out misleading statements with the intent to deceive, or blame shifting, lying to avoid responsibility by blaming other people, gaslighting, which is manipulating someone to doubt their memory or perception, which is precisely what went on during that local government election last year, right? It has been history of Jamaica when it comes to the parish council election that the party that has the majority of divisions within that parish wins the parish, and it's considered a win. And whenever there is a tie, it is considered a tie, not a win, not a loss. Ever since the political parties came into being, the PNP and the JLP, and we have been running these parish council elections, it has been the practice of adding up the number of the parishes won by each party, and the party which wins the majority of those parish councils, they are considered the winner for the parish council election of that particular year. And that has been the practice from day one until Mark Golding, that treacherous Englishman, entered into the arena. And then, all of a sudden, he is telling the electorate that it was the PNP who won. The JLP got 7 parish council seats, called municipal corporation these days, and the PNP won 5, right? And there was a tie, and that comes now to 13. He, Mark Golding, who sit in our parliament illegally, he was going around, him and Dayton Campbell, all over the place, all over the media houses, telling the people of Jamaica that them win. Them win because they had the majority of the people who turned out to vote, 320 odd thousand, while the GLP had a little over 300,000. So them say because of that, them win. Right? And how did they arrive at that victory? According to them, it is the mayors that is the number of mayors that you have. That is what determines whether you win the election, yes or no. And according to him, the JLP had 7 mayors, the PNP had 7 mayors, and since the PNP had the majority of votes in the in the election, that means the PNP won. That I put to you, Damian, is gaslighting, manipulating someone to doubt their memory or perception. So when you're talking about gaslighting, look first into the mirror, sir, at that abomination that is now leading the People's National Party. And may I remind you, sir, that you were one of those who supported this abomination to take over the PNP, right? You were there on a recording being heard saying that you have more in common with him than you have in common with Peter Bunting, and of course with Lisa, and so on. We're not going to get into that, we're just pointing it out. So we thank you immensely for this segregating of the meaning of lies, and we shall be using it not only in this video with your presentation, but in future presentation. What you say to that? You agree? Yes, of course you would. And that is very wise.
Mr. President, it is upon us that we are called not just to know the truth, but to stand for it. As children of light, we must mash down lies wherever they rise. For what fellowship hath light with darkness? Indeed, they said love and hate can never be friends. Mr. President, the JLP's entire communication is dependent on one statement that the Prime Minister made, and I quote, he said, "There are several generations of young people who do not know our modern history. There are generations of middle-aged and older people who have forgotten." The JLP is dependent on the youth who might not have known and the older individuals who might have forgotten. Indeed, Mr. President, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. And the JLP has the heart to mislead, the heart to deceive, the heart to misinform, the heart to misrepresent, the heart to hoodwink, and the heart to hold to power at any cost.
So now, folks, you heard what he said. So we are going to listen out for him to prove each and every one of these statements he made, including the one at the end where he said the heart to hold on to power at all costs. Now, I don't know what he's talking about, and I hope he's going to explain, right? Because you can't be making these statements and don't have nothing to back it up. Unless what you intend to do, let me see what lie would he be practicing? Stretch the truth, which is to make something bigger or better, or exaggeration, that's what that is called. Or he intends to present some misleading statements with the intent to deceive or blame shifting, right? Let's see if he can back up these statements and show evidence where the government has misled. This is the government side now in the debate, that they have misled the people. He said they have a heart to deceive, so they have deceived the people. They have presented misinformation. They had misrepresented the truth. They had hoodwinked the people and has exhibited a tendency to want to hold on to power at any cost. Right? They would sacrifice the country's well-being, the economy, the security of the country would be compromised. Whatever it is that they need to do to hold on to power, he's saying that they are prepared to do so. He needs to show us the evidence of what he's talking about. Do you agree? Yes. So we are on the watch and we're listening carefully. And if he cannot provide any evidence in the form of examples of what he's talking about, then we can readily say that he would be guilty of presenting misleading statements in the Senate. And of course, misleading statements are given with the intent to deceive. He wants the people of Jamaica to think that the Labour Party is guilty of all these things and then just leave it there. So, right? With the hope that they will go away with the impression that what he said is true when he provided no evidence as such. So, we're on the lookout.
Their mouths, Mr. Speaker, have revealed what their masks have tried to hide. No matter how well you pretend, your words will tell the truth about you. The first set of lies that would have been established would have been along the lines of inflation. And in this case, there is students, I want you to look, there's a line there called total inflation, which is the addition of all the years of inflation. It was put there to indicate that there was a period of PMP governance that had such a large level of inflation that it was 2,249. The failed to acknowledge this was the longest term that any government has ever served. They failed to acknowledge this was the longest term that any government has ever served.
Is that true? Did they fail to acknowledge that this was the longest term that any government had ever served? Is it true? And presumably, this would be the evidence, or one of them, that Damion would be showing. Is that right, Damion? Of lying on the part of the government. So I ask the question again. Is it true when you said that the government never acknowledged that this was the longest term that a government has ever served? And so, to double check, just to double check, we are going to go back to listen to what it was that Andrew Holness had said to see if Damion is on to something. And Andrew Holness, in his speech, mentioned the 2,200 plus accumulation of inflation and never mentioned the period of time, thus attempting to deceive the public in thinking that this is a 4-year term or an 8-year term that the government would have accumulated this inflation. That clearly is what Damion is suggesting. So let's return to what it was that Holness had actually said.
Madam Speaker, let us examine the facts. Let's start with inflation. Let's have a look. The table now being displayed shows that the average annual inflation under my administration has been 5.5%, the lowest under any administration since 1972. This is within the inflation target of 4 to 6%, despite the effect of global inflation resulting from the post-COVID supply chain shocks and geopolitical conflicts. Without the post-COVID inflation spike, we could safely project that our average inflation rate would have trended around 4.3%. The period of highest inflation in Jamaica's history was under the PNP administration of 1989 to 2007.
You heard that? Did you hear Andrew Holness actually say what the period was of the highest inflation? You want to hear it again? All right.
The period of highest inflation in Jamaica's history was under the PNP administration of 1989 to 2007.
So you heard it for yourself. He said the period of highest inflation in this country was under the PNP from 1989 to 2007. So that when Damion said this,
they failed to acknowledge this was the longest term that any government has ever served.
That was not true. But just in case the context in which the Prime Minister spoke was within what it is that Damion is saying, that it was deceptive, or it was not true what he was saying, or it was not necessary, let us listen further to what it was that the Prime Minister had said.
The period of highest inflation in Jamaica's history was under the PNP administration of 1989 to 2007. During that period, inflation averaged 18.5% per year. Listen to this, resulting in cumulative inflation of 2,249%.
Now, folks, what was wrong with what Holness said, or even how he articulated the statistics? He pointed out that, first of all, that the inflation has been the lowest under his administration, under his leadership, right? Is that a fact? It is. It doesn't matter what it is the lowest. It's a fact. The next point he wanted to make from the statistics that he was showing was that the highest period of inflation was under the PNP between 1989 and 2007. Is there anything wrong with that? No, it's a debate. You're supposed to go out there and present your arguments. You're not supposed to go out there and present your opponent's arguments. It's your arguments. And he presented the argument, and he said that it was 18.5% per year. That is what is there. So there is no deception there. He's telling you what it is. And of course, I'm going to mention a big number to make it look as bad as it was. But that is not where the blow really was. The blow really came when he sought to illustrate what the inflation meant in dollar terms, when he said that the price of bread in 1980 was about 50 cents, right? A loaf of bread, that is a hardware bread where you buy national bread, 50 cents. I don't think we had hardware sliced bread in those days, so it would have been the hardware bread, right? And then by 2007, he said the price went up to over $100. Now that is to show you just the price, the movement of the prices over the period. That was a solid point. Now you're going to hear as we go along, maybe not in this video, but I'll show you certainly in the next, where his colleagues were telling him not to speak and not to touch the matter of FinSAC. Don't leave that out. Don't film colleagues that say no, leave that out. Don't talk about that. And he wouldn't listen. And so I would say that this point having been made in the budget and nobody not talk about it, Damian ought never have to have brought it up because it don't make the party look good. He should have just left this part out and just deal with what it is that he can win on, because this was never going to be a winning subject. Are you following me? It's a debate. Why are you going to bring up something that somebody now is going to check? Bring back to your remembrance what it was that the Prime Minister said and make the party look bad now. I mean, to me, it was a poor it was a poor decision on his part to bring it up, unless he was going to come with some arguments, right, to say it's not true or something. But simply to bring it up and then say it should not have been there and try to present it as evidence that the Prime Minister was trying to deceive the public, when he clearly stated the period and he clearly stated what the average was and he clearly stated the accumulated amount over the 18-year period. So to me, I think that was a bad decision, a tactical decision that he should not have taken. He should not have brought it up at all. Just left that part out. I don't know what you think. What do you think in terms of a debate that is ongoing? I personally think it was a tactical error on the part of Damion Crawford. Now, he had more to say on this inflation business, so let us listen to what else he had to say.
Here to indicate that there was a period of PMP governance that had such a large level of inflation that it was 2,249. They failed to acknowledge this was the longest term that any government has ever served. And so therefore, over 18 years, they sought to compare with 4 years. And therefore, the accumulated level of total inflation was an unnecessary segment in this table. The Prime Minister made heavy weather of this 2,000, not indicating the period of time, and sought to also compare Jamaica's reality with the United States reality. Before I indicate the reasons why this is not an adequate comparison, even the numbers that they have presented suggest that there are multiple times that the JLP was worse than the PNP. Now look at February 1989 to September 2007. This is the exact presentation from Mr. Prime Minister Andrew Holness, Dr. Andrew Holness. If you look at the 89 to 2007, 18 and a half years that the PMP was in power, the average annual inflation was 18.5%. In the United States, for which he was seeking to make heavy weather, it was 2.9%. That's almost 6.3 times what existed in the United States. But he failed to have done sufficient analysis to recognize that in September 2007 to December 2011, which was the JLP, they were at 12.3% in relative to the United States, 1.5%. That's 8.2 times what was in the United States. So therefore, if it is that relativity was supposed to be used, the JLP in 2007 to 2011 was 8.2 times inflation in the United States. However, the PMP was 6 times inflation in the United States. However, for the knowledge of our students, I'd like them to know that even that was a false analysis. There was no real basis to utilize the United States in comparison with Jamaica.
So here you go again, Damian, claiming that you know about economics, and yet you're presenting an argument which shows that you're ignorant of the subject. I am no economist either, but at the same time, I hope I have common sense. And you cannot be saying that the government has no basis to utilize the United States in comparison with Jamaica, because there is a basis, and the fact is the United States is one of our major trading partners. Most of our goods are shipped to the United States, not to the Caribbean islands, and most of the goods that are coming to Jamaica are coming from the United States. And therefore, it is essential to compare inflation between the two countries, because if you are expected to export to United States and you are running an inflation of 18.5% per annum while their inflation is 2.9%, then clearly our exports are going to be uncompetitive. So when you talk about there's no real basis to utilize United States, you're talking rubbish. And you ought to know you're talking rubbish. And if you don't know, then what does that say about what you do know? No, Damian, that was not a winning argument at all. And because you couldn't win that argument, you sought to give the impression to the students, because you're pointing to them, that somehow when the Prime Minister made the comparison, it was not appropriate. What are you talking about?
If you look at the 89 to 2007, 18 and a half years that the PMP was in power, the average annual inflation was 18.5%. In the United States, for which he was seeking to make heavy weather, it was 2.9%. That's almost 6.3 times what existed in the United States. But he failed to have done sufficient analysis to recognize that in September 2007 to December 2011, which was the JLP, they were at 12.3% in relative to the United States, 1.5%. That's 8.2 times what was in the United States. So therefore, if it is that relativity was supposed to be used, the JLP in 2007 to 2011 was 8.2 times inflation in the United States. However, the PMP was 6 times inflation in the United States. However, for the knowledge of our students, I'd like them to know that even that was a false analysis.
Now, that relativity data that he brought up when he compared the inflation in Jamaica and the United States, he said that under Bruce, the inflation was 8.2% greater than what it was in the US, while under the PMP, it was 6.3%. Right? He made a solid point and failed miserably in expounding on it. Because if he had recognized the importance of the information, then he would have scored some points. But then he left it hanging to go on to make another statement about the fact that the Prime Minister made worse progress in terms of inflation. The PMP brought it down to 6.3%, and Wholeness reduced it by less than 1% after that. What the hell is the point that he was making? What was he supposed to do? Are we supposed to bring the inflation down to negative? I mean, I don't understand what that was. Had he stuck to the point about the relativity of the how many times Jamaica's inflation was than the United States, it would have been on to something, because then I would finish it for him and say to you, Damian, that if you were to now talk about trading and the effect that the trading would have, with the inflation being so much greater, then our exports would have been even less competitive under Bruce, even though his inflation was lower. Is the kind of argument that I would have expected from somebody who understood the issues. But then it is your presentation, and you make your presentation whatever it is that you think that is going to make you win the argument in the debate. But when you went on to say this,
but there's even more information in the slides that the Prime Minister presented. In the slides that the Prime Minister presented, it proved that he had the worst performance since he got the baton. Indeed, in 2002, 2007, the inflation was 18.5% on average. The Bruce Golding government received the baton and reduced it by 6.2 percentage points and carried it down to 12.3%. The Portia Simpson Miller government got it and removed and reduced it by 6 percentage points and carried it down to 6.3%. Andrew Holness got it and carried down to 5.5, a reduction of less than 1 percentage point. So he's making a big deal about look how me fast when it's just that he got a good batter. Prime Minister Bruce Golding reduced it by 6 percentage points. Prime Minister Portia Simpson reduced it by a further 6 percentage points. Yet they tried to convince us that the best Prime Minister we have ever seen reduced it by less than 1 percentage points.
And there is where I think, Damian, you lost the plot. Because the Bruce Golding government reduced it by 33% from the extremely high 18.5%. No inflation is supposed to be there. No inflation is supposed to be at 12.3% either. But when Portia brought it down to 6.2%, that was a drop of 50% in that 4-year period. Now remember that you said that the Holness never go far enough in analyzing the data he was presenting, and he should have looked at the relativity of the United States and Jamaica, right? In terms of inflation. So Portia brought it down to 6.3%, which is 5.2 times what it was in the United States. She brought it down 50%. Holness now, you said, brought it down by less than 1%, right? Yes, it is in relative terms. He brought it down 13%. But when you look at the comparison between the inflation in Jamaica of 5.5% and that of the United States of 3.4%, you're talking about our inflation being 1.6 times greater than that of the United States, coming down from the 8.2 times that it was under Bruce and 6.3 times under PJ in the 90s, and the lowest was 5.25 under Portia. You are the one, Damian, that said we must look at the analysis in relativity terms. And the relative term is that Holness has brought the thing down to 1.6 times the inflation in the United States. And based upon your argument, this is excellent. Are you see so? So you came to the parliament and you brought a dimension to the debate that you said is important in looking at the figures and determining how well a government did or how badly the government did. Right? And you do it tactically. It was a poor decision for you to have brought it up. And you ought to have looked and seen that by bringing it up, it would have made Holness look better than you are claiming that he is, because you said that him did badly because he could only reduce it by 0.8%. How low could the inflation go, Master? Based upon the way in which you were arguing the point, you said that he brought it down by less than 1%. Had Holness brought it down by 3%, you would still be able to show that that is less than the 6% that Portia brought it down by. That would have been your way of arguing the point. No, that is your way of arguing a point. But the thing is, your point is easily defeated by logic. That was a tactically poor decision of yours to have brought relativity into it. Because now you're showing by your own argument that Holness was doing a damn good job. And that is not what you opened the debate to do. You're supposed to be poking holes into what it is that Wholeness was saying. And when you say you can't poke hole in it, master, left it alone. That's what you should have done. Instead, you have actually gone and presented arguments that shows that Wholeness is doing a damn good job as Wholeness claim. And so by presenting your arguments the way you were in the parliament, what you have done is prove that Wholeness was not lying when he said that he did an excellent job. You brought in dimensions to prove that fact. How could you make such a stupid mistake? And no, my Labourite friends are very excited and they're more quarrel and say, Michelle, leave him alone. Yes, it's true. But we have to point out to a young fellow that far from claiming that he's proving that Wholeness was lying and deceiving you and the public and those young children that were there, him come with arguments to show that the man, I never seen nothing like this from a barn. And this is the man that like to turn up him nose at people because them not bright like him, and them not know economics like him, and them not know maths like him, and him love to put down people. And I have to tell you, Damian, you are the most idiotic politician that ever walked the face of this earth. 40 odd years old and you don't have any blasted sense. How could you not have completed the analysis and realize that far from proving that Wholeness was doing a poor job, what you in fact would have been doing is proving what he said is true, that he is the best manager of the economy of all times. And therefore, don't bring that argument to the debate in the Senate. How could you not have expected that somebody would complete the table of relativity that you started to see what the results would be? If it wasn't me, it would have been somebody else. How could you not have believed that somebody is going to take it further and show that Wholeness is indeed not lying about his claim that he is the best manager of the economy since independence? Because that is the purpose of all those charts that you saw coming from 1962 until present. It was to show that his administration has managed the economy better than everybody else's, except perhaps in the 1960s. You went and provided that information. Don't talk to me, my people. Never say not like this. Tell me in the comment section what you think. Seriously. Lord have his mercy. Anyway, folks, let me leave it here for now. I'll come back tomorrow or later perhaps with more analysis of what Damian said. We have to take him in small doses, because, Damian has much to say, and at times it makes sense and sometimes it don't make no sense at all, and very often it let down for him side. Anyhow, thank you all for joining me today, for sharing, liking, subscribing, and leaving your comments in the comments section. Until next time, take very good care of yourselves and walk good.